Welcome to the Awesome Black Dad Show, where our goal is to give life to the stories of fathers in a way that empowers and encourages dads to be a better version of themselves. Today's episode is our first opinion episode titled The Lebron Effect, and we're pretty excited. We're looking forward to your feedback and conversations with the hope that it leads to a meaningful dialogue with the selected audience member. If you want to be considered for being on the show to debate this topic, if you're on social media, go to our Awesome Black Dads Facebook page. This episode will be the very first post that you see, and share your brief comments about why you agree or disagree with my opinion. And for those of you that aren't on social media, send us an email to info@awesomeblackdads.com, and we will... Man, enough of that introduction stuff, man. Get the people what they want. All I was trying to do was keep the people informed, but here you go messing with my mic. Without further ado, the LeBron Effect. LeBron James came into the NBA with the most pressure of any professional basketball player in the history of the game, and arguably any professional athlete, but that's a subject for another conversation. I would even venture to say he surpassed what most would believe his ceiling would be. Forgive the first departure to Miami and the decision debacle, even though I felt some type of way about how that would affect the competitive nature of the sport, but I actually can't blame him for leaving. I mean, have you ever been to Miami? Let me rephrase that. Have you ever been to Miami in the prime of your life with more money than you could have imagined? Nah, me either. But I completely understand. You'd be hard-pressed not to have LeBron James among the top 5 greatest players of all time. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, everything the man has orchestrated off the court puts him in a class of his own, and it makes it harder and harder to critique his on-the-court legacy. But we are talking basketball right now. I truly don't want to get in an argument about whether or not making 8 consecutive trips to the finals is a greater accomplishment than going undefeated in 6 appearances. What I would like to debate, however, is how in an effort to create parity between two greats, yes, Michael Jordan and LeBron James, we are to some degree unknowingly diminishing the idea of what it means to be great. We've heard it 1,000 times. When LeBron left the Cavs for the pristine beaches, unlimited access to wet willies, world-class nightclubs, backyard barbecues with Rick Ross, and oh yeah, not to forget, NBA championships. In his wake was a brittle, broke-down Cadillac of a team desperate for some residual of an identity. That team went from being in the Eastern Conference Finals to total obscurity. At first glance, most would use that to emphatically argue that the abysmal Cavs team is a true definition of how great LeBron was and still is. I beg to differ. Here's my simple explanation. Apart from the single achievements, greatness is also ultimately defined by the legacy that a person leaves in their absence. Keeping with the theme, let's look at MJ's legacy in comparison. Accolades and accomplishments aside, when MJ retired in 1993, the Jordanless Bulls made it back to the Eastern Conference Finals, and many would argue that they were robbed of a chance to compete in the 1994 NBA Finals. Let's take a look at that roster, shall we? The starting 5 consisted of Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, B.J. Armstrong, Pete Myers, and Bill Cartwright at center. I will spare you the time of reciting the entire player roster, but I don't want to neglect the contribution of Tony Kukoc, Steve Kerr, and John Paxson. Needless to say, most experts predicted that the Bulls would be gone fishing by playoff time. But in true overachieving fashion, the Bulls won 55 games, which was only 2 games less than the previous year, in which they won their 3rd straight title with MJ. They finished 2 games behind the first-place Central Division Atlanta Hawks and clinched 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, if we are going by the leadership logic mentioned earlier, and in many barbershops across the country, LeBron leaving the Cavs results in a total collapse and somehow increases his value as a leader. We would also then have to say that in Michael Jordan's departure and the resilient nature of the Chicago Bulls would in turn decrease Michael's value as being a leader, therefore ultimately in some instances diminishing his legacy. Let that marinate for a little bit. Yeah, I know, it's hard to put into perspective. To say that Michael is less great because of the level of success the Bulls organization has in his wake is hard to comprehend, and I'd argue that it wouldn't win an argument in any case. But let's step away from sports for a second, because that's not the true purpose of my theory. So let's look at the other leaders that may have been regarded as top in their field. Reginald Lewis, for example, was an American businessman that, among a number of different successes, took his company TLC Beatrice, formerly known as Beatrice Foods, a major American food processing company with holdings in 31 countries, in a matter of 6 years to $1 billion entity before his passing in 1993, effectively making Mr. Lewis and TLC Beatrice the first black-owned business to have over $1.6 billion annually in sales. TLC Beatrice remained successful for years after his passing, being run by his widow. I could rattle off a ton of other leaders, John H. Johnson, Steve Jobs, John D. Rockefeller, to name a few, that seemingly created successful cultures that would linger, basically long enough to sustain a level of success that, to the naked eye, would appear to still be under the orchestration of the missing leader. Many of us want to be seen as great leaders while we're alive. In my honest opinion, great leaders are not only measured by current achievements, but also by the state in which they leave the world in their absence. I remember way back in the day when I would see an ex-girlfriend, and if they were doing worse, somehow I would attribute that fact to that I was no longer around. When I think about that today, I realize how immature and void of wisdom that kind of thinking was. From where you stand today, if you have a family, you are constantly thinking about how you can set the foundation strong enough that your children and significant other can have something firm to stand on in your absence. Think about it. It's the primary reason that we should pay a monthly premium for life insurance. And don't get me started on GoFundMe movement. That's a whole other conversation. Actually, let's talk about GoFundMe for a second while we have a little time. Today, the GoFundMe platform that makes fundraising as simple as clicking a button has upwards of 125,000 memorial funeral campaigns per year, raising over $330 million per year. Statistically, I'm not sure what percentage of the 125,000 campaigns are for families that have made no plan for the passing of a loved one. But I will say I've seen more than my fair share, more than I would like to believe. To be completely honest, I'm torn between the good and the bad of GoFundMe. I'm sure there are genuinely good people out there who are in need and require the assistance of a community for support. But I cannot help but feel a large majority of those genuine folks miss their mark. Sadly, the people that have been left behind without a blueprint have no idea how to move forward, and mourning the loss of a loved one while unpacking their baggage has to be pretty devastating. These are the effects of historical conditioning, miscommunication, or the lack thereof, and no true framework for the means to create a lasting legacy. My question to you is, how are we as fathers measuring greatness amongst ourselves these days? Is it the house we live in? Is it the cars we drive? How about the titles that we hold at our respective places of employment? I believe that as men, we should be just as concerned, if not more concerned, with what we will leave behind, including a plan for how things should be in our absence. It's the reason we should, without a doubt, have life insurance, and for some of us, let's be honest, financially, we are worth more dead than alive because of the stability we want to leave behind. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that a man's value in totality is the weight of the money bag that he stashes away, but his value should be a reflection of the lives that he is enhancing and the plan to maintain that lifestyle in the event of his departure or demise. This is not just about dollars and cents. That's actually the easy part. The hard part is deciding who the kids should go to in the event that both mom and dad are gone. I mean, grandma ain't no spring chicken. Should the surviving significant other sell the current house or pay it off? These are a few of the hard decisions that require a great deal of thought, both logically and emotional, communication and execution. It's the execution part that gets most of it. We fail to execute on these things in a legal way that ultimately protects the legacy that we are trying to create. Think about it. How do you believe wealth is transferred from generation to generation? And in some cases, how do you believe wealth is created? The bottom line is that as protectors and providers, we should want everyone that we love and care for to be better in the absence of our present. That should be the goal. So why are we not defining greatness and legacy by what is left behind? As I wrap up this, I have one question before I let you go. How do you want to be remembered? Thanks for listening. And remember, if you want to be on the show, shoot us an email at info@awesomeblackdads.com or post a comment under the pinned post on our Facebook page. Until next time, be awesome.